What's the holdup, Pep?
It's something internal. Something must have gotten loose inside.
Huh. Well, how do we fix it?
Manny and Charles are inside right now trying to find the problem.
Inside?
Manny has a built-in shrinking machine and was able to shrink himself and Charles down to go in.
Of course he has that ability.
Well, the good news is, the bus can still run, so living in it won't be a problem. The bad news, it's gonna take about 3 episodes worth of time to get it fixed.
Well, we waited this long before finding a place. What's a few more episodes? I'm sure I could find a trilogy of games to talk about.
Yeah. Yo. It's time for Danny Tree Frog Reviews.
Hello everyone, welcome to Danny Tree Frog Reviews. While the RV bus is being worked on, I figured it would be a great time to talk about the Midway Arcade Treasures trilogy. How those two connect? Well, it'll make sense by the third game, I guess. During the early to mid-2000s, Midway released a few game collection games, but probably their most popular, or at least most successful ones, were the Arcade Treasures games. There are technically 4 of these games with Arcade Treasures in the title, but for now we'll be looking at the ones released for PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. So, let's get started with the first one, simply titled Midway Arcade Treasures, or Midway Arcade Treasures 1, depending on which release you bought. They're both the same thing with... okay, you get the idea. Well, this is kind of interesting looking. I mean, I guess it makes sense if they're going for treasures and, you know, pyramid filled with treasures, and stuff like that. What was that, an early DVD menu?
Yeah.
So about this, menu here? I gotta say, this is a really odd and not very good setup here. I mean, I appreciate what they were doing when they made this menu, but no, Midway, no, go to the corner, think about what you did. Now with that criticism out of the way, let's get to the games. Now, I'll be reviewing these games individually, briefly, and come to an overall conclusion of this whole collection if this is a good collection. What a beautiful image they put there for their officially released game. First up, we have 720 Degrees, I guess that's how you're supposed to say it. A little skateboarding game that was released in I'll let you do your own research. The controls for the game can take a little bit of getting used to, but it kind of feels, and well, looks like one of those Tony Hawk games on the Game Boy Advance, just with a more cartoony look to it. I'm cutting it a little bit of slack for its age, but I don't know, I just couldn't get into this one as much. But then again, the only real skateboarding games I truly like are the earlier Tony Hawk games on consoles. I'm sure this game still has its fans, but I'm just not one of them. Next up, we're taking a look at Blaster. I kind of went past this title screen faster than I wanted to.
Robot Grid. Fly through magic arches. Dude, could you imagine being high playing this?
I mean, this isn't really what I'd say... I really don't know how to describe this game. I mean, it's a first-person shooter, space shooter, whatever you want to call it, and it looks like it's either 3D or pseudo-3D back in the early 80s, so it looks pretty cool for the time. I just don't know if anyone would really be all that comfortable playing it now. Especially those who have problems with seizures. Next up we have Bubbles. I mean, this one should be fun. How could you say no to a face like that? You know what? This game isn't too bad. It's slightly confusing in some areas, but it's a little enjoyable. It's one of those games where you consume little things to get bigger, and the bigger you get, you can consume bigger things, and it's easier to get the smaller things, and you know how it is. It's overall enjoyable. Okay, that took a little bit. Next up we have Defender. This one's actually a little more well known. I think the kids still know what this is. I'm assuming you're defending something, maybe these little things down here. It's kind of hard to tell. It looks a little more like a offender. It plays fine. It's not great, but it's fine. Up next we have Defender 2. It plays primarily the same, with some additional things, I think. That kind of seemed to be the big thing back in the day, was to make the sequel not so much of a sequel as it was a slight change and a slight upgrade. Again, it plays fine, it's just kind of the same thing, sort of. Up next we have Gauntlet. Do you remember Gauntlet? I remember Gauntlet. I've briefly talked about this before, so I'll try to keep it even briefer. This is a hack and slash dungeon crawler. That's about all I can briefly say about it. It's an okay game, it just gets a little ridiculous on how you have to control it. I mean, yeah, this was 1985, but still. Just an okay game. Up next we have Joust Williams. This is basically a fast-paced version of Balloon Fight. Only a lot more confusing. Yeah, I could never really get into this one. The controls are a bit too slippery, and it's really confusing as to when you can actually, attack the enemies instead of them attacking you. So yeah, overall, not a big fan. Next up, of course, we have Joust 2. Unlike Defender 2, Joust 2 actually has a lot more changes, such as different levels and apparently different things to fly. But it's only marginally better than the first one, so I'm still not a big fan. Up next we have Handlax, known as Clax. It's another one I've talked about before, and I rather like this one. It can be an enjoyable time. It's one of those games that's vaguely like Tetris, but not really. So if you like puzzle games with really weird sound effects, then you might like this one. Up next we have Marble Madness, one of my favorites. And thankfully, unlike the last time I talked about this, it doesn't control like ass. I mean, it is something where you have to get used to the controls, but it can be really fun when you do. I may be a little biased here, but this is definitely one that I would consider getting for this collection for, Paperboy. I'm gonna stop talking about the fact that I've talked about some of these games before. This is another one that I just didn't really like all that much, because the controls are really not all that good. I mean, don't get me wrong, the setting is really interesting. A paperboy in this really weird town, but if it wasn't for the controls, I might like this a little more. Rampage, based on the film from 22 years later. It's not my favorite in this collection, but it is an enjoyable one. Nothing better to do but to just smash everything up and eat things. Rampe Art. Just a little strategy game, I guess you could call it, or tactics game, maybe a mix of the two. I'm not really into these types of games, so of course I'm gonna say I don't like it as much, but I'd say if you're a fan of this type of stuff, then you might enjoy this. And I would suggest playing this on console, because on the Game Boy Advance it's a bit too small. And I reference that because I played this before. Oh, sh**. Roadblasters. I guess we're gonna blast the road here. I mean, you can go at any time now if I can figure out how to control this thing. There we go. It's kind of like a more advanced version of one of those pole position games. It just has some more realistic car things to it in the wrong areas. Seems like you run out of fuel way too fast. I mean, I don't know. This isn't very good. I mean, the graphics look pretty good. They look pretty appealing, but that's about it. Robotron, the movie from Disney. It's a shoot-'em-up game in which you shoot up robots and save humans. The game. Other than some variety in looks, there's not really much to this game. It's just a fun little time waster. Satan's Hollow. I skipped over the title screen too fast. It's like a lot of other generic space shooters, except you're not in space. I mean, it's fine, it's just been done to death. Sinister. This is a sinister... I can't make up a joke. It's a space shooter, but it's a little more interesting because it actually kind of feels like you're out in space. I mean, I imagine. The controls are slightly slippery, but you can get used to them. It's a fine experience.
Let's go!
Smash Bandicoot TV. It's a bloody, violent shoot-'em-up game that pretty much represents Midway outside of Mortal Kombat. Kill people and earn cash, your typical deep dark web stuff. Up next is Splat. I sure wish I could explain what's going on here, but I don't even think I know what's going on here. I think you're supposed to cause things not to go splat, or cause things to go splat, maybe hit the opponent, but I don't know. I don't know this game. Spy Hunter. Hunting spies. Not really, I don't know. Hunt down and make cars crash until your car crashes at the end, and motorcycles apparently. It's a decent little game. Not too great or anything, but it's a good time waster. Super Sprint, featuring the largest cars in any game. Okay, I think you get what I mean by that bad joke, but I think that joke would have worked a little bit better with Micro Machines. This is another game I'd recommend not playing on the Game Boy Advance, considering how small the cars already are. It's fine, there's just better racers out there. Root Beer Tapper, only here it's filed under Tapper. Well, this is alright, but I don't see Wreck-It Ralph anywhere. Now this is a fun little challenging game. This really shows off the living hell of being the only employee at a store at the moment. This is definitely one I'd have higher up on the list. Totally tubular, it's tubing. And it's not all that great. I mean, I like the looks of it, but it's not all that great. It just doesn't feel right to me, and I couldn't get used to the controls, as you can see. And finally, we have Vindicators. Well, it's tank controls, but it's okay because they're tanks. So it can take a little bit to get used to the controls, but once you do, it's a decent little game. I'd say it's pretty fun. I mean, it plays just like a lot of other tank games, but that's not really a bad thing all the time. And that's all the games that were featured. As you can imagine, there's some extra stuff talking about like the development of the games, or advertisements, maybe some videos of interviews, things like that.
My contribution was this. I did 100% of the software. Brian and Sharon.
Yeah, I can imagine the budget for this whole thing was not very large, or at least a lot of it went to the games. It's a fine collection. There's not really that many great games, but there are some gems in here, and also some not so good ones. But overall, it's a fine collection. Join me next time as we take a look at Part 2, Midway Arcade Treasures 2. But until then, hit the like button if you like this video, subscribe if you want to see more, and remember, this is Danny Tree Frog with Danny Tree Frog Reviews.